Imagine a road that stretches into the horizon, a road that is clearly marked on every map, every atlas, and every navigation chart produced for the last 50 years. You drive for hours, following the line on the paper, expecting to see the skyline of a bustling industrial hub. But as you cross the final ridge, the road simply ends. It doesn't transition into a dirt path. It doesn't lead to a gate. It stops in a jagged edge of asphalt, overlooking a vast empty basin where 10,000 people were supposed to be living. This is the reality of the place they call the 404 Missing City. A place that is officially recorded, historically documented, yet physically impossible to find. It is a glitch in the geography of our world, a silent testament to something that was never meant to be discovered. If you have ever felt the hair on the back of your neck stand up when looking at a blank space on a map, then you understand why we are here. Before we descend into the shadows of this forgotten architecture, I invite you to join our search for the truth. If you find value in uncovering the world's most guarded secrets, consider subscribing to this channel and sharing this journey. Together, we can ensure that these stories are never truly erased. The story of the 404 Missing City does not begin with a disappearance, but with an anomaly. In the late summer of 1992, a long-haul truck driver named Elias Thorne was commissioned to deliver a shipment of industrial cooling components to a city known in the records as Ozerka. According to his manifests, Ozerka was a thriving settlement of 15,000 people, centered around a state-funded research facility. He had the coordinates. He had the radio frequencies for the local way stations. He had everything a man needs to find his way home. But when Elias reached the point where the city should have been, he found nothing but a sea of gray dust, and a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight. There were no buildings. There were no people. There were no ruins. There was only the wind. When he tried to report the missing city to the authorities, he was met with a wall of bureaucratic confusion. They told him Ozerka didn't exist. They told him he had the wrong coordinates. But when he showed them the map they had given him, they confiscated it and told him to go home. This was the first crack in the facade. For decades, the area had been a blind spot in the public consciousness. It was a region of the world that people passed by but never visited. It was a place that existed in the periphery of the mind, a name on a list that no one ever checked. But after Elias Thorne's report, other stories began to surface. Stories of travelers who had seen lights on the horizon where no lights should be. Stories of pilots who had flown over the region and reported seeing a massive, shimmering grid of streets that disappeared as soon as they tried to photograph it. The more the government tried to erase the city from the records, the more it began to haunt the edges of our reality. It became the ultimate ghost story for the digital age, a city that had suffered a catastrophic failure not of its infrastructure, but of its very existence. The deeper you dig into the archives, the more disturbing the evidence becomes. We managed to obtain a series of redacted files from a source who worked in the National Cartographic Agency during the mid-90s. These files contain references to a project labeled Archive 404. The documents describe a city that was built with a singular purpose. It wasn't a city for people. It was a city for an experiment. The architecture was designed to be modular, capable of being moved or altered at a moment's notice. The streets were laid out in patterns that defied traditional urban planning, resembling the circuitry of a massive computer, more than a place for human habitation. According to these files, the residents of the city weren't citizens in the traditional sense. They were participants. They were men, women, and children who had been recruited from the most isolated parts of the country, promised a life of luxury in exchange for their cooperation in a study on human social dynamics and environmental stressors. But the study wasn't what they were told it was. The real purpose of Archive 404 was something far more sinister. It was a test site for a new type of psychological and physical isolation. The government wanted to see if they could create a society that was completely decoupled from the rest of the world. A society that lived in a closed loop, where every sound, every signal, and every interaction was controlled and monitored. They wanted to see if they could make a city disappear while people were still living in it. And for a while, it worked. The city thrived in its own pocket of reality, invisible to the outside world, until something went horribly wrong. In the autumn of 1994, the signals coming out of the city changed. For years, the monitoring stations had picked up the routine chatter of a functioning town. The sounds of local radio, the hum of the power grid, the mundane transmissions of a community going about its day. But on October 14th, the chatter stopped. It was replaced by a single, low-frequency tone that pulsed with a rhythmic intensity. It was a sound that didn't belong in nature. It was a sound that made the listeners feel a sense of impending doom, a biological trigger that told the brain something was fundamentally broken. This tone continued for 72 hours, and then there was only static. When a tactical team was sent in to investigate, they found the city exactly as it had been left. But the people were gone. The reports from that tactical team are among the most haunting documents I have ever read. They describe entering a city where the clocks were still ticking, where the streetlights were still flickering, and where the air was still warm from the heaters in the houses. They found dinner tables set for meals that were never eaten. They found half-written letters on desks. They found toys scattered on the floors of playrooms, but there was not a single human soul to be found. No bodies, no signs of a struggle, no evidence of an evacuation. It was as if the entire population had simply been blinked out of existence. The most disturbing detail in the report was the state of the local school. The investigators found a classroom where the teacher had been writing on the chalkboard. The last sentence she had written was unfinished. It read, "The lights are coming for..." As we look at the footage of these abandoned streets, you can't help but feel the weight of those missing lives. These were people with dreams, with families, with a history. And in a single moment, they were erased. The city itself became a tomb. But not a tomb for the dead. It was a tomb for the forgotten. After the tactical team withdrew, the government took a final, drastic step. They didn't just abandon the city, they attempted to delete it. They used high-yield explosives to collapse the major structures. And then they brought in thousands of tons of earth and stone to bury the remains. They wiped the coordinates from the satellite databases. They altered the maps. They turned the 404 city into a myth. But you can't kill a secret that deep. The Earth doesn't like to hold on to things that shouldn't be there. Over the years, the ground has shifted. The layers of cover have eroded, and the city has begun to scream. If you take a high-powered radio receiver into the basin where Ozerka once stood, you can still hear it. It's not a voice, and it's not music. It's a series of numbers, spoken in a flat, monotone voice that sounds like it's coming from 1,000 miles away. These are the number stations of the 404 city. They broadcast 24 hours a day, repeating strings of digits that seem to have no meaning. But cryptographers who have studied these signals believe they are not codes for spies. They believe they are coordinates for places that don't exist on our maps. It's as if the city is still trying to communicate, still trying to find its way back into our reality. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence we found was a series of photographs taken by a former maintenance worker at the facility, a man who only goes by the name of Marcus. Marcus worked in the underground tunnels that ran beneath the city. He describes a world of concrete and steel that extended for miles in every direction. He says the tunnels weren't just for utilities. They were lined with rooms that looked like holding cells. They were filled with equipment that he didn't recognize, machines that hummed with a strange blue light. Marcus claims that in the weeks leading up to the disappearance, the atmosphere in the tunnels changed. He tried to climb to the surface, but the elevators were dead. He had to crawl through the ventilation shafts for hours. When he finally emerged into the moonlight, the city was gone. He stood on the edge of a massive empty crater, looking down at the place where his life had been just hours before. He was the only one left. He spent years in hiding, convinced that the people who erased the city would come for him next. His photographs, though grainy and damaged by time, show glimpses of the world beneath the 404 city. They show the strange symbols painted on the doors. They show the wires that look like veins. They show a place that was never meant for human eyes. The psychological toll of a mystery like this is immense. How do you mourn a city that officially never existed? How do you grieve for 15,000 people who have no death certificates? The survivors, the few who were away from the city on that fateful night, have been left in a state of permanent limbo. They are told they are crazy. They are told their memories are the result of a mass delusion. But they remember the smell of the bakery on the corner of Maple and 3rd. They remember the sound of the children playing in the park. They remember the names of their neighbors. To them, the 404 city is more real than the world they live in now. They are the living ghosts of a deleted reality. As we reach the final layers of this mystery, we have to ask ourselves the most difficult question of all. What if the city didn't vanish? What if it just moved? There are those who believe that the experiment in Archive 404 was successful, that the government didn't just learn how to isolate a society, but how to shift it into a different frequency of existence. They believe the 404 city is still there, right where it always was, occupying the same space as the empty basin. It's just a few seconds out of sync with our time. It's a parallel world, a ghost dimension that occasionally bleeds into ours. This would explain the lights on the horizon. This would explain the radio signals. This would explain why travelers feel a sense of dread when they cross that empty landscape. They aren't walking over a grave. They are walking through a city they can't see. Think about the implications of that. If a city can be shifted out of reality, what else is missing? How many other blank spaces on our maps are actually hiding entire civilizations? We live in a world where we think everything is mapped, everything is known, and everything is under control. But the 404 city proves that our understanding of reality is incredibly fragile. We are like children playing in a room, unaware that there are doors all around us that we can't even see. The people of Ozerka didn't die. They were just moved to the other side of the door. And every once in a while they try to knock. The final reveal came to us in the form of a single, unredacted memo found in the basement of a defunct government contractor's office. It was dated 1 year after the disappearance. It was a progress report on the transition phase. It stated that the residents of Archive 404 had successfully adapted to the new environment. It said that the isolation was complete and that the subjects were no longer aware of their previous lives. But the most chilling line was at the very end. It said, "The success of the 404 protocol has provided the framework for the next phase. We are now ready to begin the transition of the first major metropolitan area. We will start with a city that no one will miss." This revelation changes everything. The 404 missing city wasn't an accident. It wasn't a failure. It was a rehearsal. It was a test run for a future where the people in power can decide who exists and who doesn't. A future where history can be edited in real time. A future where your home, your family, and your entire life can be reduced to a 404 error. As you sit there watching this, look around you. Look at the streets you walk every day. Look at the people you know. How many of them are real? And how many of them are just waiting for the tone to start? The tragedy of the 404 city is not that it is gone, but that it is being forgotten. We are the architects of our own ignorance. We accept the maps we are given. We believe the history we are told. But somewhere, out in that empty basin, the wind is blowing through streets that aren't there. A teacher is still writing on a chalkboard. A radio is still playing a song that no one can hear. And a city is still waiting to be found. We have reached the end of this journey. But the mystery of the 404 city is far from over. It lives in every shadow, every glitch, and every unanswered question. If this story has made you look at the world a little differently, if it has made you question the reality you take for granted, then our mission is a success. Please help us keep these stories alive. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this documentary with someone who isn't afraid of the truth. The more people who know about the 404 city, the harder it will be for them to delete the next one. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop looking for the places that shouldn't exist. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next mystery.